guys for the opportunity to present this paper, and it's just a joy to be with you. I'm going to be reading from the paper. There are a few copies around, so I may not have made enough copies, but maybe you can sit next to someone. But this paper is a proposal of how reality informs us how to be good persons. It attempts to answer Dallas Willard's 4 questions from his posthumously published Disappearance of Moral Knowledge. This is a book that came out a few years ago, published by a few of Dallas's former students. It's an excellent book that traces how moral knowledge has disappeared primarily from our cultural institutions over the last 100 years or so. And at the end of the book, he raises 4 questions, and that given our knowledge of the nature of reality, we can know what good is and how to be good persons. So this paper is not intended to give a complete defense of these 4 stages. Rather, these stages are an immodest proposal of a philosophical framework for connecting reality to good and to being good persons. So here are the 4 questions, or 4 stages as I'm calling them in the paper. So stage 1 is reality or existence. The question at stage 1 is what is good, or what is the nature of good? And what I'm going to argue there is that reality or existence, being qua being, is essential exemplification, and good is identical to being. Stage 2 is the question of how do we know good? And I'm going to answer that we know the reality and good through direct experience, kind of a doxastic particularism. And then at stage 3, the question is who is a good person, or what is a good person? And I'm going to answer that good persons are those who fully exemplify their essential natures with Jesus as a paradigm case. And then at stage 4, the question is how do we become good? And I'm going to answer that persons become good through the completed exercise of their essential nature. So let's look at each of these 4 stages in turn. So stage 1, the ontological question is what is good? And my answer is going to be that reality or existence, or being qua being, I'll use those terms interchangeably, is essential exemplification, and it is identical to good. So human beings can experience reality through their senses. We are aware of the existence of reality through particular cases of sense experience. Barring a demonstrative argument for skepticism, we know that this is the case. And with a nod to Roderick Chisholm, we do know many things after all. It is our knowing ordinary things of sense experience that we can come to see that existence of things is simply the essence of a thing being exemplified. Now this occurs in a few simple steps. First, we receive the qualities of an object into our minds through sense experience. Second, we abstract the individual qualities from the experience and hold them before our minds. Third, we see the individual qualities of an object are distinct from the existence of an object. Fourth, we judge that the existence of an object is distinct from the qualities that the object has. And then fifth, we see that the object's existence is the exemplification of those qualities essential to it. And that gives us to the notion that being is essential exemplification. Now that's a long metaphysical story that I'm just introducing to you here very quickly in a short paragraph. I have a book-length treatment on this, and I think it's defensible as a plausible understanding of the nature of metaphysics or being as such. Professor Moreland, J.P. Moreland, has a brief defense of this view in the Philosophical Foundations book and a few other places. He defends it slightly differently than I do here. I'm trying to ground it in our ordinary sense experience from cases of experience. He does it in a more kind of desiderotic fashion of trying to weed out options for how to understand existence as essential exemplification. I think my strategy is supplementary to this, or complementary to this, but it comes to the same conclusion. This next paragraph of the paper, I think I'm going to skip. In that paragraph, I try and give you an artifactual example of this, of how we know, and I talk about the California burrito, which was invented here at one of the quote-unquote Birdo's taco stands here in San Diego County. So that's, if you're visiting from out of town, this is some metaphysics with local cuisine combined together. But I'm going to skip that paragraph. So if we can establish at stage 1 that existence is essential exemplification, then stage 1, part 2, what I want to do is show a good argument or two to show that being and good are identical in things, but distinguishable probably by a distinction of reason to reason within our minds, so that we can distinguish good from being, but being and good are identical in things, and ultimately in God. So this is stage 1, part 2 at the bottom of page 1 on the paper. If it's reasonable to conclude that what is real is essential exemplification, then the next stage is to show that essential exemplification is identical to good. This can be done by paying a particular attention to the act of essential exemplification itself. If some things come into being, then necessarily a possible exemplifiable essence has become actually exemplifiable essence. If this move from possibility to actuality occurs, then necessarily there's a completion of the possibility of an essential nature. Any logical possible essential nature has as part of its nature the real possibility to be actual or to be actualized. Now, again, we might, I think I'll just stick with metaphysically possible here. So philosophers distinguish metaphysical from logical possibility, but I'm just going to go with the metaphysically possible options here. For example, this is maybe an homage to Comic-Con, which is here in San Diego regularly, which is just slightly weirder than ETS. But consider, for example, the possible essential nature of a Wookiee. While a fictional creature, Wookiee essences are exemplified and unsubstantiated. But the essence of a Wookiee is a metaphysically possible exemplifiable essence. Further, if a Wookiee essence were exemplified, then a Wookiee essential possibilia would have moved from being merely possible to being actual. That is simply to say that an essential nature that is possible necessarily has one of its qualities, the quality of being possibly exemplifiable. When an essential nature is exemplified, the quality of being possibly exemplifiable is now completed through the act of exemplification. This entails that the existence of anything is necessarily the completion of the potential for exemplification had by any essential nature that is possibly exemplifiable. Thus, all acts of existence, of essential exemplification, are completed acts. As completed acts, they exemplify a kind of perfection of any possible exemplifiable essential nature. So to use Aristotelian language, there's an aim-atness of any possible being. Any possible essential nature aims at its own being. These essences, those essences which are exemplified have their aim-atness completed in the act of exemplification. The completion of the aim-atness of the possible essential nature is fulfilled in that act. This is a perfection of an essential nature's possibilia for actualization, and this perfection is good. This is an elaboration of what Aristotle calls at the beginning of his Nicomachean Ethics, the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim. To prove this, one needs an argument. Following a variety of Thomistic arguments, one such argument in 2 parts to get the identity claim might run something like this. All fulfillments of essential possibilia in an act of essential exemplification are perfections. All acts of essential actualization are fulfillments of essential possibilia in an act of essential exemplification. Therefore, all acts of essential exemplification are perfections. All perfections are good. Therefore, all acts of essential actualization are good. And then the converse would be argued in a similar way, and I'll just skip that little argument there. So to get the converse, that gives you the conjunction of the two gives you the strict identity claim. One of the puzzles, if any of you are into Thomistic logic, or the logic of the medievals, I'd be grateful for a conversation to understand how some of these arguments, they look like they're strict identity claims, but they only give you one category overlap in a universal affirmative proposition. And they want both, the universal affirmative and the converse of those. You can't get that by logical moves, so you need 2 arguments. But Aquinas in his argument seems to try to do it in one, and I feel like I'm missing something. So in that, so if any of you know those arguments, I need some help with that. Okay, so this gives us the identity claim we're looking for. All acts of essential exemplification are good, and good is essential exemplification. If these arguments are sound, then good and being are identical in things. Metaethics is grounded in being. Being in reality is good, and good is being or reality. Okay, I'm going to skip the next artifactual analogy to just for the sake of time, and move on to stage 2. So this is the epistemic question. How do we know what's good? My answer is going to be we know reality and good through direct experience of particular cases. It's important to note here that our knowledge of the nature of reality and our concomitant knowledge of good are grounded in ordinary acts of experience of the world as we find it. Our knowledge is entirely commonsensical. It's common because anyone who's capable of experience can be aware that existence is essential exemplification, and it's sensical because it occurs through ordinary sense experience. This is a form of epistemic particularism, coupled with a direct realist, dare we say naive, account of sensory perception. Note well that the epistemology of stages 1 and 2 does not rely on any theories or presuppositions or antecedent methods. It's a straightforward, common sense experience of how things are, given in ordinary acts of experience, coupled with a reflection on the factual features of those experiences in order to see that reality is essential exemplification and that reality is good. This is a quasi-phenomenological, epistemic, meta-ethical particularism. If you put all those, that's a mouthful of description of a position, but that's what I'm after here. I think the idea of relying on antecedent theories or methods, you always are going to run into the problem of the criterion, along with a whole host of other concerns. So I'm trying to ground this in an epistemic particularistic way. The epistemology of reality and good will be especially salient in our proposal at stage 4 regarding our knowledge of good persons. To know what a good person is requires stage 1 and 2 above. Maybe I should clarify that and say, you can still know what a good person is, but you might not have a full account of what a good person is. And that's what I'm attempting to do here. I'm not saying you have to have all this in order to recognize a good person when you see them. You might even see that they're a good person, but not give a full account of how it is that they're a good person. And that's what the stages I'm hoping to elaborate on here will do. So this is grounded in our direct awareness of what persons are. We arrive at this knowledge through our common sense experience of ourselves as concrete instances of exemplified human essences. You can also see this in our direct knowledge of other human beings. All right, stage 3, who is a good person? If stage 1 and 2 are reasonable, and if we know stages 1 and 2 through particular cases of reality, then in order to specify the reality of good persons, we need to specify what a human essence amounts to and what it looks like for human essences to be fulfilled. So let's make a twofold distinction at this stage of the notion of good as completion of essential exemplification. So necessarily when something exists, its essence being actualized is completed qua a fulfillment of the possibility of the essential nature to be exemplified. Thus, necessarily, any existing thing is good. Reality is good. But in another sense, this is the second fold here, some essential natures are sufficiently complex, organisms would be paradigm cases here, such that the instantiation of their essential natures requires time to be fully manifest. Thus, when an essential nature is exemplified, when a human being comes into existence, for example, that human being is good in terms of its mere existence. However, human essential nature contains many possibilia that are not fully actualized when it comes into being. Thus, every human being is good in the sense of mere existing, but not every human being is good in terms of fully exemplifying all the essential qualities which really exist in a mode of potentiality within their actualized essential nature. Thus, for a human being to be good, or more simply to be a good person, is to both be and to have all of one's essential qualities fully realized. We do have knowledge of our essential nature from our own direct experience of ourselves. We know from general revelation that we have at least 3 main features: bodies, wills, and minds. This is a fairly obvious fact of human essential nature that it goes at least as far back as Plato's Republic, if not earlier. To be a human essential nature which fully exemplify our essential qualities will be to see what the telos or goal or purpose of our essential qualities are, but also to specify how they can become fulfilled, which leads us to the next stage of our Immodest proposal. I think I'll skip this next paragraph. I just try and specify 4 things here about our nature: our rationality, volitionality, relationality, and our creatureliness, our human hylomorphism, as those connect to the image of God. That's going to be really important at this stage of specifying what a good person is, because that's going to be a part of our essential nature to be fulfilled in order to be good. Okay, so that's the end of stage 3. Stage 4, our last stage here. How do we become good persons? And my answer is going to be good persons are produced through the completed exercise of their essential nature, by grace through faith. If reality is essential exemplification, and if reality is good, and if human good is fulfillment of human essential nature, then how does a human person become good? If stages 1 through 3 are correct, then we know that to be good requires the fulfillment of our essential nature, and if our essential nature consists in something like a body, will, mind composite, then the maximization of one's bodily, volitional, and intellectual telos will be that towards which human effort will be directed to produce a completed essential nature and thus perfected human good. And I suggest there are 3 steps in this process. First, we have to specify the proper ordering of our nature from a natural law perspective. Plato's prescriptive psychology in the Republic, coupled with an Aristotelian account of virtue cultivation, might fit the bill here. From a Christian perspective, the process of salvation, from justification to sanctification, would be paramount. I think this is a really necessary component of this stage. Second, we must specify the practical steps to obtain the proper ordering of our souls. Aristotelian notions of virtue cultivation through proper education and habituation might be in order here. Analogies with obtaining excellence in sports or music are particularly salient. To become good at being a good violinist or a shot putter or whatever sport you prefer, I must know what violin playing or shot putting is and then conform my life to playing and habituate myself to play well. This might also involve having proper coaching and mentoring. So a Christian apologetic of becoming a good person must be developed. If there were an excellent, this is kind of tongue-in-cheek here, if there just were an excellent example of a perfect violinist who achieved the perfection of her playing, or a concrete, imitable, perfected shot putter whose path to perfection one can follow, this would help human beings achieve the maximal perfection of our nature quite handily. Might such an antecedent, concrete, and inimitable case of a morally perfected human be at hand? It's like asking us at ETS is sort of like, what we were talking about. If there were such a person who could be the paradigm case of a perfected human being, fully human and fully perfect in human essential nature, that person could serve as the model for any human being willing to follow their path to human well-being. Of course, Christians have recognized this since the birth of the church. Jesus is the only clear contender for this position. And one should, of course, test this for themselves, whether the claims of a man who claimed to be perfected human essential nature in a concrete, imitable way will really work to get us to the goal of the full maximization of our essential human telos. Now again, this might be limited to what Aquinas calls imperfect happiness in this slide. I'll try and make that distinction in the next paragraph. Third, we must include the long run of human happiness. But what about the long run? In the long run, aren't we all dead? Every year come to ETS, I feeling that long run coming to a conclusion. Doesn't stage 4 just end with the necessary failure of human maximization of essential nature? Boethius, in his Consolation of Philosophy, seemed to think that the following syllogism shows us that the answer is yes, at least under the sun. Anything that can be taken away can't be the highest human good. Everything that is part of fortune in the physical cosmos can be taken away. Therefore, everything that is part of fortune in the physical cosmos cannot be that which brings us the fulfillment of our essential nature. So whatever it is that fulfills us will have to be that which is itself something that cannot be taken away. And thus our maximal fulfillment will necessarily involve our participation or our taking on the nature of that maximal perfection which is itself an essential nature which is maximally perfect and thus maximally real. In other words, human teleological perfection is only possible by participation in a being whose essential nature is to exist. This is where Christian revelation claims become intriguing as an account of how this special revelation as a way to fulfill what is lacking in general revelation or natural theology or natural metaphysics. If Jesus is the incarnated God, incarnated God, a maximally perfect being whose essence is existence and goodness, then he serves both as a model for maximizing and completing human essential nature for those willing to take up their cross and follow him, but also as a way of participating through his unique God-man nature in the very nature of God qua maximally perfect being. It sounds very spiritual, and of course, if human essential nature involves bodily perfection, then some account of resurrected human bodies will be required at stage 4. If there were good evidence for a concrete, imitable, perfected human body which participates in the nature of God while maximally perfect being, then this could count as really good evidence that our path to being good persons, because we fully exemplify our essences in the same way as that imitable case, will be open before us. Now, Jesus claimed to be both the resurrection and the life, and this can be plausibly maintained given the fact that there is appropriate evidence justifying belief in our knowledge, given the justifying belief in his resurrection, which gives us knowledge. Because Jesus rose from the dead, we have a testable path open to us, as well as several thousand years of people who've tried this path. We have an open invitation to anyone who cares to examine it, to see if it holds up to philosophical scrutiny. Such a possible path could be just the thing to fulfill our deep human need to be good persons, maximally fulfilled in our essential natures. If these four stages are plausible, then the path to be really good persons is grounded not in mere fideistic hope, but in reality. As John said, to all who receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor husband's will, but born